All right, so welcome to today's Now is the Time TA Center office hour entitled Interconnected Systems Framework, Integrating School Mental Health and PBIS. I'm Joanne Oshel, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to our two great presenters, Christina Pate and Rebecca Harris, to get started with the session.
Thanks, Joanne. Okay, so there's our disclaimer. I'm sure you've all seen before, but the views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services and the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration or the Department of Health and Human Services. And here are our three grants that are under this plan. So we have Healthy Transitions, Project Aware, and Recast. I'm just going to keep going quickly because I think you've all seen these before. And I am supporting our subject matter expert today. My name is Christina Pate. I'm a Technical Assistance Liaison for the TA Center. And today we have Rebecca Harris back with us for our fourth office hour. And normally we would do introductions, but I think we, since we just have our two participants, we know who's on the line today. So I think we can go ahead and turn it over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Christina. Welcome, everybody. I wanted to also welcome anybody who might be watching this as it's recorded at a later time. We know that there has been some turnover in the grants and that other people may have been involved in different parts of the project and are now involved in this one. So welcome to everyone. In the event, just so you guys know the history of these office hours, these were actually set up to support the ISS series that Christina and I trained out in California and Maryland. And so we have a link to those in case you have not seen the webinars that were created to capture that content. The other thing we wanted to let you know about is that on the office hour number 3, we featured Montana, and a lot of people had conflict on that day or had taken a day off for vacation. So we wanted to give that opportunity and a reminder for anybody who may have missed it, that their office hour and all of their examples of how what they've accomplished so far with the grant are available in a webinar, and the link is right here for you. So we have objectives specifically for today, and we are really going to be focusing on disclosure of year 3 and you guys entering into sustainability in years 4 and 5 with all your grant objectives. And so we're going to be looking at the 13. Just as a reminder, we're going to be looking at you guys identifying the implementation phase you think you are entering as you're closing out this year. And then Christina is going to come back on, and she's going to be talking about the July convening, getting some input about what was helpful, the content covered there, and anything else that you would like for moving into these next 2 grant years so that we can make sure to meet all of your needs. All right, so I'm going to do a brief review, and all of these office hours have been set up with a little bit of a reminder in the beginning when we won't spend much time on those slides, but it's really set up so that you could take this content and share it with the rest of the people working on your grant. So we've pulled some key slides from the material that we had previously trained on and that are in the webinars, just with some reminders. And then we're going to move into the content for today, which is talking about showcasing your efforts, and then we'll move into the discussion and wrap-up. So as a reminder, in case we have anybody new watching this, we put out an assessment really asking people where they were, what did they need for next steps, what was going well, and then we designed these office hours around that. So there were 14 main requests that came out. Through that, we were able to address 12 of them in these office hours. And then for the classroom management and the data collection, those were the 2 that we could not fit in with the other topics, so we provided information on where to get that information. And then the link for the webinars is in the blue, and there's a series of 3 there for you. The celebrations that we collected at the very beginning, and really this was a year ago, so we're expecting to see even more as you guys progress and move into sustainment for these. So we have growth both in PBIS and the mental health, blending those together. Some people have chosen the ISF format, and then others are using other techniques to accomplish all of the 13 grant objectives. Okay, specific link to the webinars right there for you. All right, as a quick reminder, we are looking at using multi-tiered system of support framework to organize and really grade both the school mental health and PBIS initiatives. So PBIS is already organized within a multi-tiered system of support, and then we will be installing school mental health into this framework as well in order to blend those two initiatives. So some basics, we have the Tier 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1, regardless of the initiative that's put into the multi-tiered system of support framework, Tier 1 is ongoing. It's always available and provided to your population. Tier 2 is when a little bit of need has emerged around, for instance, mental health or problem behavior, depending on your initiatives that you've put in. The focus is on identifying the kids early and putting supports around them. And then at Tier 3, we're going to see a move to more intensive needs. The frequency, duration, and intensity of the problem behaviors would increase. And so we'll be looking to respond with appropriate level interventions for them as well. So reminder that we're looking to use evidence-based practices in the implementation. Of course, we will have the data. We'll be talking about the data systems and practices a little bit in our data collection and showcasing today. Stakeholder engagement, knowing who is supporting. So we have the students, their parents, the staff in the building, your board, your community. And ISF really focuses on not only what you have within your school for student mental health and behavior support, but really extending those supports that are within your continuum that you are creating for the kids out to include access to what's available in the community as well. You want to always ensure also that you are using culturally relevant and appropriate interventions. We know that while we might see some similarity between different project-aware initiatives, sites, that the actual needs of the kids within their community might have some similarities, but they might also have some really distinct differences. So we want to make sure that while you can have the main components using a multi-tiered system of support, we want to make sure that you are really individualizing your practices that you're implementing for the kids to meet their specific needs. All right, brief slide on the multi-tiered system of support. This is the picture and the summary slide of the previous one. So we're working with Tier 1, 2, and 3. We're looking to sustain 80 to 90% of our population with just Tier 1 level support if we implement with fidelity. And 5 to 15% will at some point in the year need to access the Tier 2 level support. And then in Tier 3, we're looking for just a small population of 1 to 5% using Tier 3 level support. So a reminder that it's a core plus more type of model. And so this framework means the core is Tier 1, so that's always provided to help sustain support for the students, and that's given to all kids. And then at Tier 2 and Tier 3, they access those just as needed, and they stay in that level of support for only as long as they need that, and then they're stepped down off the interventions. So core is your Tier 1, and then more as needed to get your core plus more. For data systems and practices, we're going to be looking at really showcasing your data today. So data, we're looking at the individual progress of students, but we're looking also at the process data, which means that we're looking at the effectiveness of the actual interventions that we've been providing for the kids. The practices are, of course, what we're giving to support the kids. Those are our interventions. And then the systems are how the adults set things up. So they're the policies and procedures and protocols that the adults put in place to allow the practices to continue. All right, so a reminder for the Interconnected Systems Framework, we're really looking at PBIS plus school mental health and taking advantage of both of those initiatives and organizing them within a multi-tiered system of support framework. All right, in the webinars, it goes more into depth on this, but this has actually been around since 2008, and we are looking at there are people who are actively doing research on this now, so if you go to the PBIS.org, specifically, that is the national website for PBIS, and all of the active research tools that they are launching and piloting can be found there, as well as the monographs. Okay, so moving forward to what we want to do, during this time of the year, we are closing out at the end of our grant cycle for this year. And you guys are accountable for showcasing and reporting out on what you've accomplished year to date for this particular grant year, but then also we're ending year 3. So we're looking at cumulative effect as well. So I wanted to show you some different possibilities of how to do that in your reporting. So we're going to look at some different ways and some different data so that we can convey different messages to the people that we're reporting out to. As a reminder, what we're reporting out on and what the federal objectives for Project Aware were, there were 13 objectives for the grant, so it's this slide and the next slide. So everything that was related, everything in your plan was related back to these 13 objectives. So everything you've done year to date has been able to, should be able to be related back to these federal objectives. So in looking to report out on how much progress you've made, there's a couple of different ways that we can do that. So one of the first things that you can do is you can identify what stage of implementation you are currently in and perhaps where you started at the very beginning of the project. So depending on, we had 20 states that received the Project Aware and then multiple districts. They each had at least 3 district partners. And everybody really started, depending on what they already had, at a different place. So one of the things that you can keep in mind is that you can identify what stage of implementation you started the project in, and then how you progressed through each of the 4 stages as the grant has moved on. And moving into year 4 and 5, where we're beginning to close out the grant, we still got some work to do over the next 2 years. However, we really want to be moving towards more of the initial and full implementation, because what we want to have happen is that after the grant closes, we want to be able to have whatever you have built in your state, in your districts, in your schools to be sustainable, even though the grant has ended. So think about where you currently are, where you started, and then at the end of year 4 and at the end of year 5, what would it look like? What is your goal by the end of year 5? And then that will really drive your content and where you need to go over the next 2 years. And then it will also help you report out on the progress that has been made, because a lot of times when you work in projects like these and you're doing especially a lot of systems change, it can really feel difficult to capture everything, all of the work that you've done. And so I'm going to show you some different ways to do that, but I also want you to be mindful about where you are as you close out year 3 and where you want to be over the closeout of the next 2 years. Okay, so I know that in your grant, you were required to keep a number of different statistics. And so really when you look at those are a lot of straight numbers is what I call them. You're required to do things like count how many kids were served, how many people were trained, and those are good. Those are good because they're part of the grant requirements, and you are showcasing how many people you have touched with this grant and all of the activities that have come forth as a result of having this. So if you look at your C&I plan for your goals, many of your goals have been in relation to the grant requirements and how many. So you'll be able to report out a cumulative, your year to date, and then you'll be able to break out year 1, year 2, year 3, and then you'll go through year 4 and 5 as well. One of the things that some of the sites are doing, they are reporting out when they're doing their quarterly reports. You're able to report out to your stakeholders. And again, everybody who's involved in helping support or who is impacted by your project. So these are great numbers to have to show your reach and the importance, how many people are responding to this, how many requests you fulfilled. So your numbers, okay, we want you to be thinking as you're moving forward towards sustainability, okay? What's your plan for after years 4 and year 5? Because you have year 4 and 5 in your C&I plan, but after year 5 and the grant closes, what will your numbers look like annually after the grant goes away? So how will you continue to sustain the number of people that you're reaching or increase, if that's your goal? So these are questions that you want to start thinking about 2 years out before the close of the grant for sustainability. Another way to showcase your accomplishment, and because of the initiatives that are combined within ISF, so we have PBIS and we have school mental health. So if you have been using any assessment and or progress monitoring tools, a great way to showcase your progress throughout, because we know that in order to cause change, there are a number of little factors that we really have to make progress in. And looking at your assessment and progress monitoring tools, that's a great way to capture the work that has been done. And so this is an example where if you look at a particular assessment, and then you look at your baseline data, which would be the first column, and then each of the grant years after that. Then you can look within, and they're usually all of the assessment tools, for instance, for like PBIS, are broken down, and you can get a total score, the subscale, and then you can also get the itemized reports as well. So this is a great way to showcase the progress that you have made over multiple years, and then within certain areas that the assessment and progress monitoring tools access. So especially for the people who are doing the work, a lot of times it feels difficult to realize how far you've come. This is a nice slide to share with them and looking at where you started and then how much further you are along as well. And then the other thing that you can do, especially with the PBIS, assessment and progress monitoring tools, because you can look at the total score, the subscale, and then the itemized as well, those allow you to pick out what you've already accomplished and what you're doing well. So always lead with a strength. Find your strength first when you look at your data. The second step in this is to look at, and really it comes down to when you look at what's left to accomplish, you can use the information, this data, to plan your next steps. So this would be really helpful if you are looking at full implementation, for example, for PBIS. The tools and progress monitoring, or assessment and progress monitoring tools, really showcase what the ultimate goal is. So now you can start looking at what you already have accomplished, what you need to sustain, and then what is partially done, and then what do you still need to work on that's completely not there. So this will help, all of this information put together would help you action plan for the next 2 years. One of the other ways, and I think the examples are really helpful in helping people understand what existed before you had this grant and the work started, and then how it changed because of the grant and the work that your teams have done. And then I also added within this how we will sustain the change that we've made, because we're moving into that in our implementation phases. So sometimes we can't capture everything on a progress monitoring or assessment tool. And the best way to showcase what you have done is to explain to people what existed before. And so it kind of highlights either the lack or the need that was there or the problem. So this is what we had before. And I filled in some examples here, and then after. So it shows the changes that occurred, and really a lot of these, the before and after, are really their systems work. And that's why sometimes it can be difficult because they're not always captured on the progress monitoring or the assessment tools. And so if you can show the collaboration, the change in policy, what has happened as a result of the work that you've done and why it's better for kids, these are the things you can use all of this data in any form that I've showed you so far. You can use this with your school board. You can use it when you're applying for additional projects, maybe perhaps to help sustain this after this Project Aware is completed. You can look at, for instance, in this financial example, the second row, if afterwards there's more intensive planning and collaboration as a community about the mental health needs and behavioral needs of your students, then you can move to how the change will be sustained and identify what you're currently doing or what's in the making to make sure it's sustained. But also, you could take this proposal, okay, if you have ideas on how to sustain it, and you could take this as a proposal and start talking to people to partner with or start looking to sustain it within your own district. Another way to highlight all of the work that your sites have done is to break it down into data, systems, and practices. And then also, I've added the sustainment column again because I want you to be thinking about this. So the numbers in the boxes with data, systems, and practices, oftentimes it doesn't always derive from just the data. Something else might come first. So in the first example I've used, first the school looked at the data, then that impacted the practices, and as a result, there was a change in systems. So you see the number 2, and then the number 3, and then the number 4, they have implemented the sustainment already. Okay, so their assessment will now be embedded annually with other student surveys. So the number 4 is there because it's completed and it's already made into a policy. Okay, so they've already been able to sustain this particular component. In the second example that I provided, instead of the data being the driver in this, they first had identified a systems issue, and that's why the number 1 is in the systems column. And then it moved to, after they looked at and identified the systems issue, they looked at their data. And then as a result of looking at the data, the practices changed. So it occurred in a different order. So 2 things. One, if you can first unpack whether it's a data, a systems, or a practices issue initially. And then, because we know that those work interdependently, then you can identify from whatever one came first. Then you looked at what happened. Was it the data, the systems, or the practices that came second, and what happened because of that? So in this one, you'll notice, started with systems, looked at their data. It impacted a change in the way that they're selecting their practices, so that's number 3. But what you will notice is missing is a number 4. And so they have an idea on how to sustain it, but it's not completed yet. So this is part of their planning, but they have an idea of what to do. They are trying to get this in the next 2 years completed, but it's a reminder for them to come back in and make sure this one is taken care of because it's not complete yet. All right, so I'm hoping that those were helpful ways for you to think about how you want to showcase all of your accomplishments that you've had in this year for grant year number 3, but then also what you've done year to date, and then to have that vision for looking ahead at years 4 and 5 and what you'd like to accomplish in the next 2 years as well. And I'm going to move this to Christina and let her talk about the convening and get some feedback from you guys on what was helpful at the convening and then what you would need to support you for the next step.
Thanks, Rebecca. So before we move on to that discussion, I just wanted to see if our 2 folks on the line had any questions or any comments about what Rebecca just went through. So I'll give you a minute to either unmute yourself or to type something in. All right, so I'm going to take silence as everything is totally clear and helpful and understandable. Of course, if you have any questions, though, please feel free to reach out to either Rebecca or me. Our contact information is provided at the end of the slides. So if you need any additional support with any of that content, please feel free to reach out. So without further ado, with our 2 participants, I was going to have you raise your hand using the tool if you attended the session, the MTSS session at the convening last month. But since we only have 1 person online, I will just have you unmute yourself and let me know if you attended the MTSS session at the convening last month, and if you did, maybe a takeaway or 2 or maybe a new learning that you might have had. So I don't know if Catherine, you want to let us know first?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay, great. I didn't attend it. So,
okay.
I can't really comment on that session. But the reason why I didn't attend it is not just because there were other wonderful offerings, but just the week before, no, not even a week before, several days before, Kelly Perales had come to Kentucky and led an all-day workshop for us for many of our, well, for a number of teams from schools in one of our regions, and a lot of our state management team members focused on this particular topic were able to attend.
Great. I would also encourage you, if you ever get a chance to connect with Florida colleagues, they also provided a lot of insightful information during the Q&A parts of those sessions. So if you have questions about anything that's going on either at the state level or the LEA level, I would encourage you to reach out to them too. And let me know if you need
Florida. That's good to know. I think we've really gotten to a pretty good place, but we're sort of on pause in our work, at least at the statewide level, just because there is some implementation guidance that's going to be released soon through the larger ISF work group. And so it made sense to wait for that, but it was supposed to be like this month or maybe September.
Yeah, that's great. So I think, yeah, we're all sort of anticipating the next iteration. I think they're revising the monograph, and it's going to have additional implementation guidance with that. I don't know if, Rebecca, you have any additional information about when that might be coming down the pike.
I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay. So, Peggy, did you have a chance to attend the convening? If so, did you attend the MTSS session? Sounds like we might have lost Peggy. Well, Catherine, I was curious, thinking about the training that you all had, what were some of the major takeaways or learnings that you did have from your time with Kelly?
I'd honestly have to go back and review my notes. I think some of the takeaways that were really kind of popping into my head at the time had to do with available or coming tools and resources that might help us along in our development of a statewide guide to helping schools adopt this work.
Great. So some really concrete, tangible things to help you carry out the work. Great. All right. Well, I know this session is being recorded, so I'm going to put a note out there for all of you out in the recorded land, archive land. If you have any takeaways or learnings from MTSS sessions at the convening or other learnings from the convening that might connect with interconnected systems, multi-tiered systems of support, PBIS, RTI, all of those things, to please send Rebecca and or me an email. Our information is at the end of the slides. And also, if you have suggestions, then looking ahead for the 4th year of the contract, what sorts of TA support you would like on any of the topics related to tiered systems or integrated systems, that would be really helpful. So those supports could be universal kinds of TA, so that might be webinars or like online panels. Also things that are more targeted, so office hours like this, or a site visit, or more individualized support like individual coaching or small group strategic planning, things like that. So it can help us propose what we're going to do to SAMHSA here in the next month, and what will be sort of implemented in year 4, so kind of a year 4 wish list. So Catherine, if you want to type something in or say something now, you're more than welcome, or if you just want to send us an email, that's up to you about a wish list.
I'll get with my team and ask them.
Great. Sounds good. So any other questions that you might have before we close for the day, since we are early?
Not right now. Thank you, though.
Okay, sorry you're totally on the spot because you're the only person here. But we do appreciate your online contribution and also on the phone. It's been helpful.
Well, sure, and I appreciate the information that you all presented here. It's helping us. So
great. So I think Rebecca's last slide was keep calm and sustain excellence. And if you need any additional assistance, feel free to contact either the TA Center at the national number or email, or better yet, contact your technical assistance provider. And if you have a chance to fill out the feedback at the end, that would be fabulous. So I think that's it. Thank you, Rebecca and Catherine.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you, you too.